Montana Territory, July 1882. The sun was just clearing the ridge east of Bitterroot Valley when Xavier Granger spotted the woman standing alone in the tall grass, her boots dusted with red earth, holding a bouquet of wildflowers like she was at a wedding that never happened. He reined in his horse, the leather creaking under his weight. "You lost," he called out. She turned slowly. Her cheeks were flushed, not from the heat but something deeper. Her green dress was simple, worn at the hem, the sleeves rolled up. Her brown hair was tied back in a loose braid, and her eyes soft, steady, and the color of river stone met his with quiet boldness. "I was hoping you'd be the groom," she said. The words hit Xavier like a bullet he hadn't seen coming. He blinked once, twice. "Pardon," she gave a half-smile, then looked down at the bouquet in her hands. "Sorry, that was foolish." She turned to walk away, but her steps faltered. He dismounted fast, his boots thudding against the dry ground. "Wait, you all right?" She didn't answer. Just sank to the grass like her knees gave out, flowers dropping beside her. Xavier crouched, keeping his voice low. "You hurt?" "No," she said, shaking her head. "Only tired. And I think I'm done pretending I have somewhere to be." He watched her a moment, then took off his hat, ran a hand through his dark hair and sat beside her. "Name's Xavier Granger. I was riding back from Missoula. Something told me to take the long way." She looked at him again. "Celia June." "Pleasure to meet you, Celia." They sat in silence for a beat. The wind moved gently through the grass, a hawk circled overhead. "You want to tell me what brought you out here?" he asked carefully. She picked at the edge of her sleeve. "I was supposed to marry someone." "Today," her voice caught. "He left 2 days ago, took the wagon, the money, and my children." Xavier's body tensed. "Your children?" She nodded, her voice small. "Cassie and Caleb, 9 and 7. He said he was going into town for supplies. I waited all night, then the next." "Nothing." Xavier stood, fury rising in his chest, but he kept his voice steady. "Where were you staying?" "A cabin, a few miles west of here. Belonged to his cousin, I think. I do not even know where he was planning to take us. He said we'd have land in Idaho. I believed him." He held out a hand. "Come on, you are not staying out here. We will go find your children." She blinked up at him. "You do not even know me." "I know enough," he said. "You are alone. Your kids are in danger. That is all I need." She reached for his hand with trembling fingers. He pulled her up gently, steadying her when she swayed. "Can you ride?" he asked. "Not well, but I can try." He led her to his horse. "We will ride double. I will take you to my ranch. You can rest there, and then we will go looking." Celia hesitated. "I do not want to be a burden." "You are not," he said simply, "and I would not let you be." She climbed on behind him, her arms wrapping around his waist, hesitantly at first. He felt the weight of her trust settle against his back. They rode through the valley, passing fields of yellow grass and pine-covered hills. The Granger Ranch sat at the base of the mountains, a modest house with a barn and 2 corrals. It was quiet but well kept. Xavier helped her down and led her inside. "You can rest in my sister's old room. She is married now, lives in Helena." Celia looked around, her eyes moving across the tidy space. "This is kind of you," he gave a small nod. "I will get you some water, then I will ride out and start asking around." "I want to come," she said quickly. "You need sleep." "And food." "I need my children more." He met her gaze. "All right, we leave at first light." That night, Celia barely touched her food. She sat on the porch with Xavier, the mountains fading into dusk. He handed her a blanket and watched the stars start to appear. "You have always lived out here?" she asked. "Pretty much. Took over the ranch after my father passed. It is quiet, but honest." She looked down at her hands. "I thought I had finally found something honest too." He looked at her then, really looked. The bruised hope in her eyes, her trembling strength. "You will find your children," he said firmly. She nodded, but her jaw clenched. "And if he hurt them, he will not get far," Xavier said. "I promise you that." They started early the next morning, riding out with saddlebags packed and rifles slung. They stopped in every town and homestead between Bitterroot and the next county, asking about a man with 2 children in a wagon headed west. By the 3rd day, they had a name, Merritt Langley, a gambler from Kansas who had run off with other women before. Someone remembered seeing him near Flathead Lake. They rode harder. Each night, Xavier made camp, lit a small fire, and handed Celia coffee with shaking hands. She spoke little, but when she did, It was about Cassie's love for horses and Caleb's knack for drawing animals in the dirt. She wanted to wear flowers in her hair, Celia whispered one night. Said she would be the flower girl for me. Xavier reached across the fire without a word and passed her a small bunch of wild daisies he had picked earlier. She looked at them, her lip trembling. "You remembered," she said. "I remember everything you say," he replied. Her eyes met his, and for a moment, the fire between them burned quiet and steady. By the 5th day they found the wagon, abandoned near a creek with empty crates and torn blankets, but there were footprints, small ones, no more than a day old. "They are close," Xavier said. Celia knelt beside the prints, tears in her eyes. "That is Cassie's boot print, I know it." They followed the trail north, and just before dusk they heard a child crying. Xavier motioned for quiet, then moved ahead, rifle ready. He found them huddled in a hollow, Cassie holding Caleb close. Both were dirty, scared, but alive. Celia ran to them, gathering them up in her arms, sobbing against their hair. Xavier stood back, watching the reunion, his chest tight. Later, Cassie looked up at him. "Are you Mama's cowboy?" He blinked. "What?" She said if someone came, it would be her cowboy, like in her stories. Celia looked at him, cheeks flushed. "I did not think you were real," he smiled, just a little. "I am." They returned to his ranch a week later. Xavier built a new bunkhouse for the children. Celia stayed in the main house. She still held the bouquet he had given her, dried now, tied with twine, resting in a jar beside her bed one morning. Weeks later, she stood in the same field where he first saw her. The sun was rising. She wore a pale blue dress. And in her hands, a fresh bouquet of wildflowers. Xavier stepped out of the barn and froze. Celia turned to him, smiling. "I was hoping you'd be the groom," she said. He walked to her, heart thundering, and took the flowers from her hand. "I would be proud to be," he said. She stepped into his arms, and he kissed her slow, like a promise. And from that day on, they were never apart again. The first frost came early that year, creeping in before the leaves had fully turned. Xavier was stacking chopped wood behind the barn when he heard the screen door creak open and Celia's footsteps in the dry grass. She didn't call to him, she never did, unless it was needed, but he sensed her nearby, the way he always did now, like her presence had settled into his bones. She came around the side, sleeves rolled to her elbows, a wool shawl tucked around her shoulders. "Cassie says the colt's taking grain from her hand now." He paused mid-stack. "That right," she named him Finch. Said it was the first name that came to her. He smiled faintly, setting the last log on the pile. "Better than Muleface, which is what I called him after he kicked through the fence. She told me you didn't even raise your voice. I won't lie, I thought about it." Celia leaned against the post, watching the sky. A hawk circled wide and slow over the far end of the pasture. "They sleep through the night now, both of them, first time in weeks." "That's good," he said, brushing sawdust from his hands. "They're safe now." She looked at him, then not with the raw gratitude she'd carried before, but something steadier. "I want to start helping with the books." "The ranch's ledgers, I mean. I saw them on the shelf in the office." He raised a brow. "You know figures. I kept accounts for my father's store in Missouri, before the war took it, and him." Xavier nodded. "All right." "I don't see why not. Also," she added, glancing down, "I'd like to start a garden out back where the old chicken coop was, if that's all right." "Celia," he said gently, "you don't need to ask permission." "I do," she said, voice quiet. "It's not mine, not yet." He didn't answer that. Just stepped closer and reached to adjust the shawl where it had slipped from her shoulder. She didn't flinch. "You ever plant in mountain ground before?" he asked. "No. But I've worked worse." That afternoon, she brought out a ledger and a stub of pencil and sat at the kitchen table while Xavier cleaned tack by the stove. Her brows furrowed now and then, but she didn't ask for help. When the sun dipped low, she lit the oil lamp without being told. Later, when the children had gone to bed and the fire was burning low, she sat beside him on the porch. No shawl this time, just his old coat wrapped around her, sleeves rolled. "Do you ever miss anyone?" she asked. He nodded slowly. "My brother Seth, he died before I took over the ranch. Fever. He was the one who wanted cattle. I wanted to become a carpenter." "What changed your mind?" "Someone had to stay and keep the place going. Folks depended on it, Seth's widow especially." "Where is she now?" "Remarried, out in the Gallatin Valley." Celia folded her hands in her lap. I think about what I'll say when the children are older, about their father, whether it's better to lie a little or just tell them plain. Xavier didn't answer right away. The night was quiet except for the creak of the windmill and the soft hoot of an owl in the trees. Truth's heavy, he said finally, but they'll carry it better if you're the one to give it to them. She turned her head toward him. You always speak like you've been through it all. Not all, he said, looking at her. Some things I'm just learning. Her breath caught just enough to notice. Like what? He didn't look away. Like how a woman can come out of nowhere and still feel like the piece I'd been missing all along. She didn't speak, just reached out and laid her hand over his where it rested on the armrest. Her fingers were cold but steady. I'm not ready, she said quietly. But I'm not afraid anymore. I'll wait, he said. As long as it takes. She nodded once, then stood. Come in when you're ready. I'll keep the lamp burning a while longer. Xavier sat there until the stars wheeled clear overhead. Then he rose, slow and certain, and followed the light inside. October settled over the valley in long shadows and wood smoke. The garden behind the house had given its last beans and squash before the frost took hold, and Celia had hung the dried herbs in neat rows under the porch eaves. Xavier spent most of his daylight hours mending fences and driving cattle down from the higher pastures ahead of snow. The work was heavier now, but not lonely. One morning, Celia stepped into the barn with a folded scrap of muslin in her hand. Xavier was oiling the hinges on the stall doors, his shirt sleeves darkened with sweat. Cassie wants to learn to stitch, she said. She asked if she could make something for you. He set the oil can aside. What kind of something? She wouldn't say. Only that it's for Christmas and I'm not supposed to look. Xavier wiped his hands on a rag. She's got a mind of her own, that one. She gets it from her grandmother. My mother once chased off a banker with a broom for trying to foreclose on our store. He leaned against the stall, arms crossed. You ever think about writing her, your mother? She passed. 4 winters ago, pneumonia. I'm sorry, Celia's eyes didn't drop. I think she would have liked it here. She always said plain ground and honest people were worth more than all the silver in Denver. There was a long pause, filled only by the soft shifting of the horses. I've been thinking of teaching again, Celia said. There's no schoolhouse closer than Corvallis. The children here deserve more than just planting and prayer. Xavier ran a hand through his hair. I could help raise the frame for one. She smiled, faint but sure. I'd like that, if the others are willing. They trust you, he said. They've seen what you've done for your children. For this place, she stepped closer, careful not to crowd him. And you, do you trust me? He didn't hesitate. I do. Celia looked down at her hands. I've been waiting for the moment it all falls apart again, that I wake up and find I imagined it. You didn't. It feels too solid sometimes. Like I've stepped into someone else's life. Xavier reached for her hand and she let him take it. It's yours, he said. This life, you built it. She looked at their joined hands, then up at him. You're not the man I thought I'd end up with, good or bad, neither, just different. Better, I think, he held her gaze. I never expected any of this either, thought I'd die with my boots on and no one to bury me. Well, she said, voice quiet, you're not dying. No, he said, and I'm not alone. That night, a storm rolled in from the west. The wind came first, knocking loose shingles and snapping the last of the dry corn stalks. Xavier checked the barn, then came in to find Celia at the hearth, coaxing the fire higher. Caleb was asleep in the corner, curled under a quilt, and Cassie had her head on her mother's lap. You all right? He asked. Celia nodded. Just a little thunder, she always hated it. He knelt beside them. I could read something, if that would help, Cassie stirred. Mama already read the prairie story. I've got a book of explorer journals, he offered, real ones. From up near the Columbia. Celia looked surprised. You never mentioned that, he shrugged. Didn't see the use in telling till now. After the children were tucked in, Celia lingered in the kitchen, drying the tin cups with a worn flour sack. You said your brother wanted cattle, she said. Did he name the brand? Xavier nodded. The G with the crescent, said it looked like the moon rising after a long night. She set the cup down. That's what this place feels like to me, like morning. He stepped behind her, his hands resting lightly on her waist. Then stay, she turned to face him. I already have. They stood in the warmth and hush of the kitchen, the fire crackling low. Outside, the wind bent the trees, but inside, nothing moved except the soft shift of breath between them. When he kissed her, it was quiet and certain, like turning a page already halfway read. They didn't speak again that night, but when she followed him to the bedroom, it was with a calmness that needed no words. And when dawn came, it found them together, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist, the storm gone and the mountains silver with frost. The first snow held off longer than expected, but the air grew sharper with each passing day. By mid-November, the hills were brittle with frost, and the sky carried that pale, watchful stillness that came before the cold settled in for good. Xavier hitched the wagon at dawn, this time with 2 mules instead of the single horse. He'd traded for them the week before in Stevensville, said they'd haul steadier through winter terrain. Celia stood on the porch with a basket over her arm, wrapped in one of his old wool coats that nearly swallowed her shoulders. She was waiting for him to speak first, as she often did now, not out of fear but patience. "There's a widow in Victor needs seed potatoes," he said, "and I told Micah I'd bring fence wire down from Corvallis." Celia stepped down, adjusting the basket. "Then I'll ride with you, you sure?" He studied her face. "It's near a full day there and back. I've been in this valley for 5 months and haven't seen more than the ridge line." She looked toward the barn where Cassie was brushing the colt. Mrs. Early said she'd watch them. "Caleb likes her, and she's firm without being sharp." Xavier gave a quiet nod. "All right then. Best pack another shawl. Wind cuts worse down past the pines." They rode out slow, wagon creaking, the mules steady beneath the weight. Celia tucked a folded quilt behind her back and watched the land roll past the bare cottonwoods, the slow current of the creek still running under ice-rimmed banks, the pale light that clung to everything like memory. "You ever think about leaving?" she asked after a mile or two, her breath visible in the cold. "I did once," he said. "Took a job driving freight down into Utah, thought I'd see more of the world. But all I saw was the same dust and the same kind of men, just with different accents. Why'd you come back?" My mother wrote and said the mare was foaling late, and that the roof was leaking over the kitchen. I figured that was her way of saying she missed me. Celia smiled faintly, her eyes still on the road. "When my father died, I tried to run a dry goods shop on my own. I was 19. The banker said it wasn't proper. That I'd need a cousin or a husband to sign the papers." Xavier didn't respond right away. Then, "What you do?" Found a man with the right name who was too drunk to read what he was signing, paid him $5 and told him to walk away. She looked at him from the corner of her eye. "It only bought me a year, but I'm still proud of it. You should be." They passed 2 homesteads and a line of broken fencing before reaching Victor. The widow's house stood near an old orchard, the trees bare and black against the white sky. Celia stayed in the wagon while Xavier carried the burlap sacks to the porch. The woman, gray-haired and bent at the spine, tried to press a coin into his palm. He refused it with a quiet shake of his head. Back on the road, Celia didn't speak until they were halfway to Corvallis. "You do that often." "What? Help people and take nothing for it." "I've taken plenty," he said, "just not always in coin." At the trading post, Celia stepped inside while Xavier loaded the wire. She returned with a small tin of cloves and a folded length of calico patterned with faded blue flowers. "What's that for?" he asked. She tucked it into the basket. "Curtains. The children's room takes the wind worst." "I thought it might help." They drove home as dusk thickened, the mules slow but steady. Midway up the ridge road, the right wheel caught a frozen rut and cracked hard to the side. Xavier pulled them to a stop, climbed down, and crouched beside the axle. "It's not broke," he said after a minute. "Just slipped the pin." Celia joined him without asking. She held the lantern steady as he worked, her fingers cold but steady on the frame. They didn't speak until he had the wheel set back in place and the wagon righted. He turned toward her in the dark, the lantern throwing long shadows across her face. "You didn't flinch." She looked at him. "You think I'm still breakable?" "No," he said, "but I remember when you were." She reached up, brushing a fleck of dirt from his jaw. "You didn't treat me like I was." He stood slowly, brushing his hands off. "You never needed saving, just someone who'd stand still long enough to let the dust settle." "And you?" she asked, voice low. "What is it you needed?" He looked at her, the silence between them full and steady. "Then, something real, something that didn't ask for more than I had to give." She stepped closer, the lantern light catching in her hair. And now I want to give more. They stood there in the hush of evening, the mules quiet behind them, the snow beginning to fall in slow, soft flakes. Then she reached for his hand, not rushed, not shy, just sure. I want to build something here, she said, not just survive it. They rode the rest of the way in silence, the kind that held warmth. When they reached the house, Cassie ran out with Caleb close behind, their cheeks flushed from the fire. Mrs. Early waved from the porch and left without lingering. Xavier stabled the mules while Celia lit the lamps inside. Later, after the children were asleep, she drew the bolt on the door and turned to find him standing at the hearth, rolling down his sleeves. She crossed the room and leaned into his chest, her cheek against the cotton of his shirt. He wrapped his arms around her, firm and certain. I want to marry you, she said. He didn't startle, just rested his chin atop her head. Then I'll fix the fence on the east side first, he said. It'll make a good place for the vows. And when she looked up at him, there was no fear, no tremble, only the quiet certainty of a woman who had come through fire and found, at last, a place where she could put down roots. The snow held through December, piling in slow, quiet drifts against the fence lines and eaves. The wedding came just before the year turned, on a morning so still the chimney smoke rose straight into the sky. Xavier had carved a bench from pine and set it beneath the bare cottonwood at the edge of the eastern fence line, just as he'd said. The mountains stood solemn and white behind them, and the only witness apart from the children and a few neighbors was the hush of winter giving its silent blessing. Celia wore a dress the color of warm milk, with a row of shell buttons down the back. Cassie had sewn a small blue ribbon into the hem without telling her. Caleb stood beside Xavier, holding the ring they'd bartered for in Hamilton, a silver band with a faint braid etched along the edge. Afterward, they served cornbread and apple preserves in the warm kitchen, the windows fogged with breath. No one spoke loud. It wasn't that kind of day. It didn't need to be. Later, when the guests had gone and the children had fallen asleep curled together on the rug, Xavier found her in the back room tying up the last of the ribbon scraps. I never thought I'd wear something like this again, she said, not turning. You won't have to again, he answered, stepping into the room. She looked at him then, a question in her eyes she didn't speak aloud. I'm not leaving, he said. Not ever. She let out a breath, and it wasn't relief exactly, but something similar, like finally stepping out of a wind that had blown too long. They didn't light a lamp that night. The fire cast enough glow to soften the corners of the room, and when he drew her close, she came without hesitation. In the weeks that followed, Celia began to gather the other families with children. They cleared out the old bunkhouse, swept the floorboards clean, and hung rough, edged slate along the wall. She taught letters with chalk stubs and taught numbers with beans counted into bowls. Xavier built benches from spare lumber, and Caleb helped carry them in with solemn care. She's got a way of making even the quiet ones want to speak, he said once, watching as Celia guided a boy who wouldn't meet anyone's eyes through the letters of his name. She sees them, Xavier answered. That's all anyone wants, really. The schoolhouse grew warm with sound through the coldest months, not just lessons, but laughter and the scrape of boots against the floor and the rustle of paper as children practiced writing names they'd never seen written before. One afternoon, Xavier came to the door with a wrapped bundle. Celia looked up from her desk, chalk dust on her skirt. This came from Helena, he said. Your license. She opened the paper slowly, her fingers tracing the seal. I'd forgotten I sent for it. I didn't, he said. I saw the envelope when it came. Thought I'd wait till you had the kind of day worth ending with good news. She stood, the letter held to her chest. You make it easier to believe I deserve this. You don't have to believe it, he said, brushing a curl back from her temple. You just have to live it. That spring, Cassie planted rows of sweet peas along the fence line. Caleb built a birdhouse with Xavier's help and hung it from the porch rafter. The birds came by May, and the garden began to green beneath Celia's hands. They added a second room to the house that summer not out of need, but hope. Celia's stomach had begun to swell, slow and certain, and Xavier laid each board with a care that made her ache in the quiet hours. One night, after the tools were packed away and the air smelled of sawdust and lilac, she leaned against him on the porch. "I never thought I'd have this," she said. "I know," he said. She took his hand and laid it against her belly. "Do you think they'll have your steadiness? I hope they have your fire." The baby came in late October, a girl with a full head of dark hair and lungs strong enough to wake the chickens. Cassie named her Willa, and Caleb carved her name into the cradle rail with a pocket knife. Celia healed slow but sure, and Xavier never left the house more than half an hour until she could walk the porch again without wincing. "You're not afraid anymore," he said one evening, watching her sway with Willa in her arms. "I'm not," she said, and it was the truth. The valley turned gold again, and then white, and then green. The schoolhouse stayed full, the fences held, the cattle wintered well, and the children grew strong. They never left Bitterroot. There was no need. Everything they'd fought to find was already there. And each night, when the lamps were turned down and the house quieted, Xavier would watch Celia settle beside him, the weight of her shoulder against his, the shape of her breath as steady as his own, and he would know, with a certainty deeper than anything he'd felt before, that they had made it home.